What's up? This segment is going to be short. I'm talking about Game of Thrones. People ask me what I think about it. Game of Thrones is one of my favorite shows. No questions about it. I like it because it kind of reminds me of Lord of the Rings a little bit, but I know from a totally different angle. Like, when we look at Lord of the Rings, if you're not into fantasy for the most part, you're not going to be into Lord of the Rings. Straight up. Like, you might, but because Lord of the Rings is really well written. Lord of the Rings is probably a better written movie than Game of Thrones. But I think what Game of Thrones has the edge is the writer kind of made it more of a political drama that's based on fantasy, obviously, but it's a more political drama. Then they slowly introduce magic into it, where I think in such a way where there's a lot of Game of Thrones fans who don't like magic, who don't like magical shows. So if you took a same Game of Thrones fan and put them to some other sci-fi shows, particularly stuff about witches and goblins and wizards, they would hate it. To be honest, there's people who like Game of Thrones who don't even like science fiction, but it's done very well. That's why I think sci-fi is supposed to be at its highest levels. Be able to appeal to people who may not necessarily be into the genre. Now, it doesn't mean science fiction have to be like that, because obviously, you know, science fiction should be about pleasing sci-fi fans. But I think when you talk about science fiction that's written to another level, or science fiction that can start to be a new threshold of pushing the genre, yeah, if you can do it in such a way where it's written and the regular public, because that's what the Game of Thrones. If you look at Game of Thrones really carefully, the first season or two wasn't really that much magic. He slowly introduced it in such a way where eventually you just accepted it. And sometimes this is what happens. This is like kind of what the key is. He kind of fed your subconscious mind a whole bunch of magic, right? But your conscious mind wasn't aware of it. And then when it started to go on, because most people rule by their subconscious, the conscious mind actually accepted it in the end. Now, I wouldn't say he was malicious by doing it, but there's other people who obviously maybe who run the world, who do things, who they use the same method. They basically introduce it to the subconscious mind. Eventually, the subconscious mind is your emotions. If you're in a more emotional state, eventually you slide in, and then your conscious mind accepts it. So I hope a whole bunch of conspiracy people don't write me, and they say that I'm saying the Game of Thrones is evil. No, I was just saying, based on the premise, how he did it, that's how other people do it, who run the world. But I think as a writer, that's beautiful. Like, where now there's a whole bunch of people watching Game of Thrones who may not like sci-fi, or who may definitely not like magic. I mean, it takes a lot of skill as a writer to do that. Now, I know he writes the books and others recreate the show, but they seem to be following his guideline for the most part. In fact, the book probably has more magic, but I think the way they push the show, they really couldn't put more magic into the show than it really is. I really sometimes read other people saying, "Oh, the show is already getting too magical. I don't want to see the White Walkers." I think it's beautiful. It's like you see the White Walkers, and it's like The Walking Dead. To be honest, like, it's almost like you mixing zombies, magic, politics, soap opera all in one shot. It's not really medieval because the kingdoms don't really exist, but obviously it was inspired by medieval Europe and Europe of the past. So you mix all those different elements in one show. Very hard to do. He has so many different storylines. Like, if we look at it, I could say he was an inspiration for myself in some ways, because I love the fact that he introduced the characters with the storylines already intact. So, especially if you didn't read the books. If you read the books, it may not be as bad, but with the TV show, it's like he would introduce the Boltons, and the Boltons already have a history. He's not going to catch you up. You either have to kind of see how it fits into the show or read the other stuff. Pretty impressive, very hard to do as a writer. I think the show is excellent show, and right now, it's between that and Walking Dead is my favorite TV shows. I kind of go back and forth, but I have to give Game of Thrones a little bit of the edge, even though I'm a big Walking Dead guy myself. But Game of Thrones, I think, is just a writer's show. Like, it's very well done, to be honest. I think Walking Dead is popular because it catches the emotions of the people at the time, which is what sci-fi does, or what art does. Art sometimes is symbolic of the emotions that's going through the people at the time. So I think in Walking Dead, we have a lot of things that we're scared of in these days and time, and I just think Walking Dead is just symbolic of that, which is why it's so big. But I think Game of Thrones will be big during any time period, which is why I think it's a slightly better show. But they both great. I both enjoy both of them. Till next time.